Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Zoltán Táncos. I grounded T-Logic almost 20 years ago. Beside me is my son, Junior. He's called Zolti. He's the architect of TCPS since the very beginning. We have been working a lot for financial institutes, developed 3 successful products. One of them is TCPS, that is running in production since 8 years, executing hundreds of rules and many thousand queries daily in 2 banks. Probably you would agree that traditionally large enterprises were or have been functioning in this form. Management issued some regulations in written human language. The employees had to understand and execute it. The verbal text could have contradictions. We have seen a lot of while checking specifications. Usually, it takes time until employees understand or misunderstand it, and very few of them even do not want to accept the regulations. To keep everything in line, education is needed anyway, but also big brothers are needed for watching and controlling. But does it really work? I think BPM and BRM were born to solve this problem. BPM highlights business rules by its nature. That is why we think an integration of Bonita and TCPS could be highly effective. BPM, like Bonita, is a great technology to document and execute business processes according to company's policy. If a concrete process instance will be executed the same way, regardless who is in charge to execute it, then the policy is well defined, exact. That means it is pretty much candidate for automation. And this is, I think, where BRM, Business Rules Management, comes in picture. That means TCPS becomes interesting. Automation is, I think, an issue in all large enterprises. Okay, some words about the agenda for today. I will take this part, this introduction, in the next 45-50 minutes. This will take about 15 minutes. I try to explain why we think TCPS is unique and also speak a little bit about what are the basic differentiators of the product. Then Zolti will highlight a little bit the main differentiators and specific functions without going into the details. And he will show you the creation, testing, and deploying of a simple loan product rule. This part takes about 20 minutes. As a next, hopefully I can show you TCPS and Bonita live integrated. We're very short, but unfortunately it will take at least 10 minutes. After all, you can ask questions and we can probably discuss a little bit how to proceed. Okay, let's start because the agenda is very tight. Let's discuss a little bit what TCPS aims. It's a common fact that software is very much sensitive to change. Basically, this is the cause of the software crisis. Everybody knows it. One of the main criteria of software quality is today how quickly can be change adopted. The change is only constant in this world, we used to say. Many companies think change is always a risk. We don't think so. Successful companies try to utilize change to get more and more responsive. A business application consists of logic that is distributed in our case in tasks, and tasks are operating on business data. Tasks are connected in business process that uses business decisions. That's the big picture of a business application. We can manifest that business decisions are changing very, very frequently. Data model and tasks are far more stable than processes and decisions. This is why a BRM like TCPS that can support automated decisions in a quick and reliable way can be interesting for you. It is an important fact that business rules are discovered and specified by business people and not by software developers. If business people can specify exact rules, then it's obvious that they are also able to manage them. That means at least understand, a little bit modify and test. Our claim is that if there is an appropriate technology for the formalization of the business rules, the business people will do it on their own. We know that our experience can be this confirmed. The most important here is to be able to test and deploy easily and independently from the process and calling program without waiting for IT people. We think that the available technologies in the BRMS scheme are not meant for business people. Really. They say that there is meant, but not really. I come back to it later. We recognized that with the common BRMS technology, it is not possible to create complex business rules. It's possible, but they are going to get the same problems as with any programming language. Probably you would agree, but later I try to show you why. Unfortunately, business rules are complex by their very nature. If we try to keep them simple, then most of the business logic still remains hidden in program code, and we achieve some parameterization only. But in this case, we don't externalize decisions really. Due to the declarative approach TCPS uses, TCPS can handle complexity. That's the second thing, to handle real-life business rules, not only software manipulated rules. Therefore, the goal number 2 is this. Okay, supporting complex rules have really big advantages. Only a few or even a single rule will be necessary for the whole process. A single rule, I emphasize it, only a single or very few. That can be evaluated at every interaction with the process. This way, we can avoid the common inconvenience that probably you met it. A piece of data will be checked once in the process by a separate rule, and then the further change will be prohibited by the process because it's already checked. That means the rules shouldn't be broken down into standalone fractions. So we can also avoid that rules used in the process get out of sync or contradict each other. In real life, there are changes all the time, and everything should be checked again and again until the case has ended. The goal number 3 is use the valuable data stored in the rules for many perspectives. What does it mean? Returning only a fire or don't fire is simply not enough, because usually your process has all data that needed for a yes or okay only at a later stage in the process. So it is really essential in the process that TCPS can provide you eventually a clear false, no-go decision in an early stage based on the data already entered, and so eliminating a lot of useless time. There is no need to create a fraction, a small part of the rule for this. You can use the same rule. In this case, your process can call TCPS to get advice also regarding the data that could be valid to continue successfully with the process. This is also very useful in case of advising the customer in a selling process, for instance. But in our demo, we will see that based on the response of the rule engine, we are able to choose several branches after an exclusive gateway. The potentially call, we call it potentially, and get condition type call of TCPS are really clear differentiators in our opinion in the market, and this is thanks to declarativity. I will come back to it later, explaining the authorization rules. Okay, goal number 4 is absolute not trivial, historical view of the rules. That means time is always an important input for the rule engine, saying the rule should be evaluated according to a given date. This can be very important if a rule or some changes in the rule should be effective only in the future. Or for instance, the rule should be evaluated according to the date when the process instance had started. This is also many times the case. This is also the case when auditors are auditing processes if all of them have been compliant or not in the past. It is also a very powerful concept in testing. Of course, the default date is always the current date. In this case, you don't care. Okay, the last but not least, non-functional requirement, because all of the above requirements put a very, very heavy load on TCPS, and this is quite a challenge. Zolti will shortly cover this topic. Okay, you are probably interested, I think you wrote also what kind of rules we implemented with TCPS. First of all, I would mention the authorization rules. TCPS got its name from historically a theologic central permissioning system. Let me kill a myth. Authorization is not only a SEC issue, basically not a SEC issue. Authorization is far more a business rule, a business issue. I speak about authorization, not authentication, because many people are confused about. For an authorization rule, I assume you would create a rule that declares for all users to which tasks each of them has access. I hope you agree. This is an excellent example of what are the different perspectives of the declarative statement. This rule, that means user has access to a list of tasks. This rule contains all information about which users can execute a task. This perspective will be used for task distribution, for instance, in a process engine. You get the same information who can execute this task. The rule is also competent which tasks should be offered to the user. This is the question how to create a context-sensitive menu. It's sometimes very valuable from the same rule. These are three perspectives of the same rule. That means the same rule can be used for all of the three cases. Usually, the number of rules increases with a very, very high speed if you are not able to use the many perspectives. Only one sentence about building SQL statements. If you have to select from a DB table from your program and the criteria of the selection changes frequently, then it is very convenient to define a business rule for the selection. It is not out of the box, but it is very easy to write a program to create dynamic SQL statements confirming with TCPS rules. The reason is that SQL is a declarative language also. I would skip this because of time. It's basically a simple issue. But I'm especially proud of our solution with the overrule rules in processes. This rule is a subrule of a complex composite rule in a complex process. There are always exceptional situations, as we will show you during this presentation in a very simple demo also. But in a complex process, needs for overrule decisions arise very early, and not only one can arise very early, and not only one. Overrule can be done usually by a person who is a manager, who is in manager position and very busy. She or he should deal with the request only if everything else is okay. This had to be solved, and this was solved by us in a way that if an overrule request was issued from a user, from a competent user, then the process was continued with the potentially is a concept of TCPS, with the potentially assumption that the overrule will be fine. At the end, when all data are available to make a real decision for the manager, about the exception, then the overruled human task will be executed according to the task distribution. That can be also part of the whole business rule. This is possible because TCPS is able to evaluate the business rule potentially. everything is about complex business rules. We have loan products as rules, telecom tariffs as rules, and more. Now we take a concrete, simple rule that we will use for our live demo following soon also. You can see it is very simple. Basically, the statement is about which loan amount can be given to a customer belonging to a customer segment. You see here to customer segment 1 to 3. If it has a small risk, and the limit of the amount is maximum 1,000. This also has another predictive where a little bit more risky, but more customers with bigger turnover come to request a loan, then they get a little bit more automatically. And this implies implicitly that all others should be refused. It seems to be very simple. Okay. Interesting thing is if we formalize it in this way, that we get a logical expression from it, then everybody can read it with a high school qualification and understand it, I'm quite sure. That means this is our goal, to get this formalization. And I show you another formalization as well, as the procedural rule engines used to do it. This is only the first predictive that I coded here in a pseudo language, but this is absolutely not for business people, and this is only a loan amount centric aspect. That means we will start with loan amount, and what if loan amount, for instance here the clause 2 is not yet available, then this cannot be executed and is useless. From this piece of code, you cannot find out what is the maximum amount that you can give for a specific segment with a specific risk and so on. And that means we don't think these are programs that avoid sometimes release management and are not as strictly tested as normal software releases, but it is really not a real externalization. What about truth tables? Okay, truth tables are basically fine. There are also seems to be declarative, but in the reality they are not. They cannot be executed also if not all of the statements are covered, fully logically covered, and you cannot join them. For instance, you cannot make a complex business rule from joining the truth table. The truth table has always a logical operator as an end between the columns. And this is also not the case. In our very simple example, it's the case, but it's not the real case. Okay, that's I listed here. What if the Boolean operator is not AND? What if there is an overlapping that is not tolerable for truth tables, as far as I know, and for instance, if you want from your rule engine, have access to enterprise data, then that it is impossible from a truth table like this. Okay, how does it look like with TCPS? It's basically very similar to a truth table, but you see here parentheses. That means all these expressions can be joined and concatenated. Other rule segment, this is a rule segment, basically other rule segments can be involved, other rules can be involved, and so on. But I don't want to go into the detail because Zolti will do that a little bit. Important is all perspectives in only one declaration, and different perspectives will be evaluated and delivered by TCPS. Shortly I mentioned that the number of rules with the perspectives, if you don't use the declarative approach, you have to code for each perspective a new small code, and this is a theoretical number of codes that could be theoretically implemented instead of only one rule. That's basically, I think, what I wanted to tell you in this first part. And now we come to live part, and a little bit later I will come back. Zolti.
Hi there, I'm Zoltán Jr. So, enterprises can get most out of their BRM if they have a single centralized system, single centralized business rules management system. Therefore, one of our most important goals for the TCPS architecture design was to make endless scalability possible, as a centralized BRM system must handle a very large volume of rule evaluations. At the end of the day, TCPS is built on an LDAP directory server, which is designed to enable endless scalability in terms of searches in rule data, and RDBMS to handle relational data and audit information, and the JEE server to host the rule engine and the administrative interface. We also have some standalone tools, standalone utilities. One of them is a TCPS test driver, which lets you run test cases defined in an Excel sheet. We have an XLS rule generator, which is a syntax checking tool for rule developers. And both of these tools are going to be replaced by rule editing tools, also called TCPS RET, which is an integrated environment for exporting, editing, testing, and deploying TCPS rules. This is currently under development. TCPS itself is implemented as two server-side JEE applications, and the TCPS rule engine itself, it's a standard JEE application which services rule evaluation requests through web service interfaces. And the TCPS Rule Center, which is also a standard JEE application, allowing users to administer, browse, export, install, and evaluate rules from a browser. It also provides web service interfaces for the same tasks. Okay, so now I'm going to show you our demo rule, just in a little bit of detail. As currently the main tool for TCPS rule editing is an XLS editor. Being able to represent rules in XLS format is proven to be a great strength, as this way even business users can easily look at the rule. We have experienced that conversations about business rules got very productive after introducing the XLS representation. Currently, I've already mentioned that the rule editing tools is under development, but we still plan to keep the XLS rule format also after introducing in a general release the editing tools. So for now, if we are going to take a look at our demo rule, which is now installed in this TCPS engine, I'm going to do a search for our rule, and by clicking on export all, I will let TCPS to assemble all the parts of this rule and provide it to me in Excel's workbook. Now if we open this workbook and start from the first sheet, which is called the rule sheet. Here we have the rule ID, which has to be unique for the TCPS instance, and most of the time it's used to refer to the rule. For example, when we want to evaluate it from a Bonita BPM flow. We believe that descriptive information is also very important, especially if we want to involve people from other business domains into the specification of testing, specification or testing of the rule. Start date and end date are timestamps which define the planned validity of the rule version in the current workbook. I'm not going into details about these timestamps because for now important is only that these timestamps are playing a role in TCPS's ability to evaluate not just current rule versions but also past ones and also future modifications. This is a great thing when one has to deal with mission critical rules, and it's also important that rule modifications can be made effective in a scheduled manner, as we will also see in our demo. In the evaluation section, the rule expression shows the high-level logical expression that defines the rule. Operands used here can be other rules or local rule segments. As operators, we can use the classic AND or NOT logical expression operators, or the is true for operator, which is an advanced logical function in TCPS that can help you out if things get tricky. Now for the demo, our rule consists only of a single rule segment, which is named general. The decision attributes sheet defines the variables used in the rule. Data can be primarily passed to a rule evaluation in the web service request, but the context can also be extended through the use of plugins. A plugin call for a given decision attribute So a plugin call for a given decision attribute can be defined in the DA function or function call cell. This way you can, for example, query the actual date, perform simple arithmetics on attributes, query a user's group membership from an LDAP server, get some value by a key from a key value map implemented as another TCPS rule, and there are lots of other possibilities. Or by writing your own plugins, you can get currency rates or query your customer database to get the actual segment where the current customer belongs to. On the RS rule segment sheet, we have the definition for our rule segment. Besides the ID, I have to scroll here a bit, sorry. So besides the ID and the descriptive informations, you can fine-tune the performance of your rule with these parameters. And going further to the rule segment expression, the RS expression, DA multi-value relation and permit value multi-value operators will determine how the actual runtime values of the variables will be compared to the constraint values defined in the below permit value sets. The DA multi-value operators, relational operators, and PV multi-value operators can be logical functions and or is true for, and of course relation must be a relational operator, for example equal, not equal, less than, greater than, and so on. Even regular expression matching can be used, and new ones can also be implemented. For example, this or equal or combination means that the cell in a PVS, in a permit value set, will be evaluated true if the runtime values contain any of the ones written to the cell. As an opposite, an AND not equal AND combination would mean that the cell would only evaluate the true if none of the values written to the cell would be present runtime. So you can pretty much formulate anything here with the correct combination. Note that in the RS expression, it's allowed to use any number of nested brackets and different logical functions. Now, if we take a look at our permit value sets, that is the cases which our rule is allowing, in the first two rows you see the same cases that were also on the slides, and I've already added another two scenarios which would allow a little bit higher loan amounts for the same customer segments, but not under automatic approval instead of but manual approval. Now let's imagine that management, this rule is now installed. As you have seen, we have exported it from the running rule center. Now let's imagine that management wants to modify the business process due to some customer complaints. So they want that from the next month, we will use only 10 minutes for the demo, every process for the VIP customers belonging to the customer segment 6 should get a manual decision, always. Therefore, we have to slightly modify our rule. I've already prepared this. I've added another permit value set, which will simply allow any loan amount and at any risk for a customer belonging to the customer segment 6 by manual approve decision. Note that TCPS has special values also for the constraints, like any value, no value, or an allow all don't care type of special value, which is simply shown as an empty cell in the XLS sheet. Now let's try to install this into TCPS. The synchronization function can be used for the installation of rules. But also, for example, the differences between the test environment and the live environment also be easily detected with the usage of the synchronization function. So this time we want our modifications to get effective at a given date and time. So I choose the manual definition mode for the installation time. That is, I will choose a scheduled installation. I will upload my XLS workbook. And first, I will accidentally set a wrong time a time in the past, just to show you an important axiom of TCPS. Now if I click next, you can see that I've got an error message that synchronization time must be future, because in TCPS past is unalterable. That's how TCPS is doing very well at auditability. Now let's try again with the future time and set this to 55, 16 hours 55. And so we have time enough for little tests. And now I just run through the installation steps with default values. And by clicking on the import button, I will start the installation of this modified rule. It indicates that it was now successful in the future. It's also interesting that the installation and browsing in Rule Center is constrained with the usage of permission rules. Obviously, the Rule Center permission rules are TCPS rules, so the administrative permissions of the rule store can be set using these. After the successful installation, let's verify the functioning of the rule by running test cases. Ad hoc testing can be performed using the evaluation function of the rule center. Now here we see my last tests. I will just simply reset this to start from scratch. I will test first the get condition to allow evaluation mode of the rule, which I will search again for our rule, select it, and Rule Center has pre-filled for me the possible attributes variables for this rule, and I will set some cases. Let the customer segment be 1 for the first time. We want to query the allowed value of the decision attribute, so we want to know what's allowed by given other attribute values. This customer will apply now for a loan amount of 900, and the risk value for this customer is 0.19. If I click invoke, then the request is sent to the TCPS, and we can see that approved and manual approved decision values are allowed. But approve is stronger for our demo process, and the Bonita connector is a perfect place to handle this situation. Our next test, so this will get down practically to approved case. As next, the customer is requesting a higher loan amount, let's say 1,100. If we check this out, then we will see that only manual approve is allowed at this value, and we can also check out what a very important customer will see when it applies for a 3,000 loan amount. Here we see that we got an empty result from the rule engine, which says it's absolutely not allowed. And that's why our customers have complained, and that's why we have modified our rule. But as you can see, our rule modification, I have scheduled it for 16:55. It's not effective yet. So if I want to test it, I will have to use the operative date and time box here in Rule Center and switch the current date for a given date and set it for a time after 16:55. So 17:33 will do it just fine. And now if I run this query again with this time, I will see the results from our modified rule, how it will behave in a future time. It will result in a manual approve. So another interesting thing is the definition of the get condition to allow evaluation mode. It has to always return the result condition that has to be fulfilled for the queried decision attributes to fulfill the entire rule. That also means that using another perspective of the rule, another evaluation mode of the rule, for example, is allowed, should only give a true value for the value returned, for the condition returned previously by the get condition to allow. And any other value has to give a false result. Just a few words about reusability of rules. It's using a central BRM is a great opportunity to build a reusable rule base. The key is to build rules driven by business scenarios and not development projects. Think about your rules as services with well-defined interfaces and service contracts. TCPS is built around this idea. I would like to thank you for your attention. I will give back the word to my father to do the demo with a small Bonita flow.